As Adrian said, I'm in the Department of International Relations, European Studies. I've been in the department for 11 years, so I've seen a lot of applications during that time. What I'll say is a few general things about the application package, some things to pay particular attention to, and then obviously leave some time after that to address perhaps some more specific concerns that you have about the application. Okay, you already have a pretty good sense of what the application package entails. I think three things to concentrate on within that package, however, is the statement of purpose or letter of intent, the academic piece of writing, and the letters of recommendation. And in a good application package, there's a definite and strong link between all of these three elements. The statement of purpose, or the letter of intent, whatever you wish to call it, I would say has to address three main questions. Certainly two main questions, but maybe a third. The first one is the what am I doing now? The second one is the why CEU, or specifically why a particular department within CEU. And the third question, which I think can be interesting to address, but maybe not quite as important, is the what after CEU. In terms of the what am I doing now, I think to begin with I'll automatically make a slight qualification on the what am I doing now. What perhaps we want you to address more accurately is what am I doing or have I been doing that directly informs my choice about CEU and the department. And this is important because I think we have an assumption when we ask what are you doing now, we're assuming that the vast majority of people who will be applying to us are either in education at the moment, in the last year of a degree, or have probably just graduated, or not been out of education for that long anyway. So there's an assumption when we say, what are you doing, that there's going to be an answer that says, oh, I've been studying this. And then the link between what you've been doing and what you would want to do in CEU is probably already made quite apparent. You say, look, I've been doing a sociology degree in ELTA. I'm looking for an institution where I can progress in this particular discipline. I've been looking at CEU. Sociology department looks really good. That's why I want to be here, and that's why I want to be doing that. There are, of course, people who will apply who perhaps have been out of education for quite a number of years, and what informs their choice for coming to CEU might, for example, refer to particular professional experience. Maybe somebody has been working for an NGO, maybe somebody has prior experience of doing volunteer work, and that somehow has informed a choice to kind of go back into education and to study something in particular with us. So, for example, if you've been involved in some kind of voluntary projects in, Guatemala or something like this, maybe this has sparked an interest that you want to take further academically. So maybe you are interested in the relationship, for example, between security and development, you're interested in the politics of aid, and you're looking for a place, a department, in which you can study these kind of things. So, I say with that qualification, kind of what am I doing, what have I been doing? I think the important thing to say again, which directly informs your choice about CEU and the department. The why CEU part of it and the why the department, I think it's good in the letter of intention, the statement of purpose, to give some demonstration that you've actually done a little bit of research and you know about what the department does. If in the letter of intent you say that you have become interested in European Union politics, you're interested in questions of integration, expansion, you would want to say something in the letter of intent along the lines of, oh, and I visited the website of the International Relations and European Studies Department, and I can see that you have professors like Michael Merlinger, who do European security and defence policy, which is exactly what I want to do. Peter Bolash, who does European neighbourhood policy, which is what I'm extremely interested in, as I told you in my letter of intent. So that you are reinforcing the link between what you've said you've been doing, what you're interested in, and the department that you want to go to, and you're giving off a very kind of good, strong, positive message that you know things about the department that you want to go into as well. You've invested some time into the application package in that way. What will you do after CEU? I think that's something interesting that people who are reviewing the applications would like to read, because it tells us something about you as a person, about how we, as an institution, as a department, can fit in to where you see yourself going. However, I wouldn't want to push that as a particularly kind of crucial element of it. It can certainly kind of enhance, or say, make more interesting the letter of intent, but I would probably concentrate on the kind of prior two aspects, two questions as the ones to keep mostly in mind. The academic piece of writing, the second bit, which is very, very important. Now, as maybe you've got some sense of already, obviously throughout the course of the day you'll get a better sense of these things, is that for the piece of writing that you'll be asked to submit, each of the departments has slightly different requirements for this. In the International Relations Department, for example, we ask for an essay. It's a short essay, 500 words, just a couple of pages. As far as I can remember, I think public policy, simply ask for a sample piece of writing. I think they put it something like this. Whereas other departments, I think this is maybe sociology, I could be wrong, some other departments ask for an actual research proposal. So keep in mind slightly different requirements across the departments. But, yeah, sure, go.
You're asking for essay about what?
Well, exactly, about what? Not things like underwater basket weaving or anything like that. Let me say, okay, before I come to that, let me say first of all, is that the academic piece of writing, whether it's the research proposal, the essay, or whatever the department might call it, the purpose of that is so that you can show to us how you think academically. Now, when I say that, I think that what's important to say that it is not about is, for example, because I come from Britain, and we would use the expression that this is not pub talk. We would kind of put it like that. You know, you sit down, sometimes you've got a kind of a glass of wine or a beer. You know, we all have strong opinions about certain things that are going on in the world, which we kind of voice to one another. But that's not what we do in this piece of writing. It's not just about voicing arguments about a particular issue of the day that you're interested in. It's showing how you think academically about it, which means constructing arguments in a way where you are introducing sources into that, other people's work, books, articles, that shows us where you're drawing from to inform your own thinking. It would be how you would write a kind of a term paper, a thesis in kind of any kind of course of study that you're doing. So as I say, for example, for public policy, what would be important for them is to see, for example, an essay, part of a thesis that you've written before. That would show them how you think academically. For international relations, we want something quite specific. When we say essay, this could mean that we want you to tell us something about a particular issue area. You might want to tell us about the invasion of Iraq, or Afghanistan, or economic and monetary union in the European Union. I mean, whatever it is that comes out of your letter of intent that you say you're interested in. Doesn't have to be an issue area though. It could be a particular conceptual, theoretical approach that maybe you've been working on already or you've had some exposure to. Or it could be the work of a particular writer. A person's writings that, again, you've been engaging in significantly before. But whatever it is that you address, whether it's a theory or an empirical example, again, what's really important is that you bring evidence to bear, that you introduce sources that justify how you're thinking, and shows us that you know how to construct arguments in this. So it's about, as I learned when I did academic writing on here, I think a term that's very, very useful to think about is it's about your thinking on paper. Show us how you think on paper. And this is where you do it in the essay or in the research proposal. The particularities of that, maybe I think Adrian might have talked a little bit about this before, but please pay close attention to what the department asks of you. So in international relations, we ask for 500 words, which means we don't want 1,000 words, we don't want 5,000 words, we don't want 100 words. We're asking this for some particular reasons, and what's important is that we can see that you've actually read our requirements close enough that you give us what we want. And I say, if you give us 1,500 words instead of 500 words, automatically this tells us something about you. You can't even follow a simple requirement for the application package. What are you going to be like when you're following more complicated requirements for pieces of work in the department? That's how we would think. So be careful about that. And again, to stress that there is a direct relationship between the letter of intent, statement of purpose, and the essay. So for example, if you are telling us that you are interested in how multinational corporations function as actors in world politics, if you've already kind of been giving us a sense about that in your letter, we would then find it a little bit odd if you wrote about the works of Lenin in your essay. It wouldn't kind of match up. So I thought you were interested in multinational corporations and now you're writing about Lenin, although I guess of course there could be some relationship there. But we need to see, as I say, this very, very direct linkage between the two, that you're clearly thinking through the package as being connected in these ways. Lastly, with the letters of recommendation, which is the trickiest, and for a number of interesting reasons why it's the trickiest. Of course, out of these three very, very important elements, this is the element that you are least in control of. You have to rely on somebody else producing for you. Nevertheless, let's say a few kind of, I guess these are kind of do's and don'ts, if you like, about the letter of recommendation. A don't. And we know this happens because we've seen it so many times over the year. Don't write your own letter of recommendation. We know it's a kind of practice. We know professors try to make you do it because they can't be bothered some of the time to do it themselves. But we can spot this from miles away. You've done it. It's incredible how supposedly different letters of recommendation have the same typeset, are constructed in the same way, and use the same words. Yet supposedly are written by different people. We know when you've written this yourself, and they'll get a big cross straight through. So try to avoid that. In getting somebody to actually write it for you, choose somebody who you think can say something genuinely of interest and consequence about you as an academic, as a student. In that way, we are not so interested in seeing what for you might be the name of some very, very important professor on the bottom of the recommendation, because that's supposed to impress us in some way.
And what if this person doesn't speak English?
That is a problem. Quite a considerable problem. I don't know, is there a little learn English in 5 minutes book or something? To tell you the truth, I'm not sure how best to address that. I'm sure that there are some things that can be done over and above what would be a response from me, which would be avoid somebody who doesn't speak English.
Or official translation of the letter with the recommendation.
I guess, yes. But I'm sure that maybe what we would want to see, if it was a translation, some evidence that somebody had officially translated it, rather than maybe thinking that you were submitting something and telling us it's a translation of somebody, and in fact it's not quite.
So
it's
a
what.
Translation office.
If that's the case, to tell you the truth, I'm not entirely sure what the best strategy for going about it is. Maybe yes, maybe a translation in that way, but yeah, I mean, application to an English language institution. Yeah, best to have an English speaker. Yeah. Although you might get, I mean, Adrian and others might be able to give you better answers than I can about that. Yes, probably, yes. Well, you can give better answers than I. So yeah, we're not interested in seeing at the bottom of the letter, let's say, a name that you think, wow, this is an important professor in the field. They'll be very impressed, won't they? Probably not, because the chances are we won't know who this person is anyway, unless people in our department have quite considerable knowledge about the people in the department, for example, that you're applying from. We will see a name and perhaps it won't resonate in the way that you think that it that it will. So that's one reason why it's not important. The second reason is, as I say, is if it's somebody who can't say something very detailed about you, the purpose of the reference is slightly lost anyway. We're looking for somebody who's able to talk about not only your strengths as a student, as an academic, he's able to tell us something about your weaknesses as well, the particular challenges that you've faced, how you've overcome those challenges. So we need somebody that you've worked with quite closely in the past. Probably somebody that you've written papers for, perhaps even a thesis, who can actually bring something like that into the letter of reference and say, yes, I know this person particularly well. I've supervised a number of papers that they've written, and I can tell you particularly about the way they went about doing this. So we need to see, say, this level of engagement from the person who's writing the letter, not only to tell us some things about you, the strengths and weaknesses about you, but also maybe even linking back to the letter of intention to confirm some of the things about you that you've said in the letter of intention. If through the course of study, to use the example again, if you've become interested in multinational corporations, maybe you wrote an essay on that, and maybe the person who writes the letter of recommendation for you is somebody who you wrote that essay for, and can tell us more about your interest in that and your strengths and the ways you've gone about addressing the questions relating to that topic. So, find somebody like that, difficult though it is. So I guess you have to be quite persistent, bothering people, imploring them that this is very, very important, and please can you provide a reference like this, this is what I need. So, yes, slightly out of your control, but you know, there are some things that you can do to try and get what you want. Some things else that we should talk about. Yes. It's not a character reference. It's an academic reference. Now I'm assuming that, as I say, for those of you who are either in education now or who are coming from just after a period in education, the letters of reference will be coming from professors that you've worked with. I think the assumption would be is that they are unlikely to therefore give you what I would call a character reference, that they will write about you as a student, as a scholar. Where character references can come in is when people have had certain work experience and they have asked an employer to say something about them. These kind of letters can be important and can be very, very relevant and useful. But what we don't want to hear, for example, is, Mike is a wonderful person. He's one of the most generous individuals I've ever come across. Sense of humour, my God, he makes you laugh all day. Great that it is to hear that wonderfully kind-hearted, humorous people are going to be coming into CEU, as they inevitably do, anyway. That's not important to us. We don't want to hear about these things. It doesn't tell us anything about the skills, the capabilities that we need to hear about. So if you are getting a reference from an employer, make sure that that employer is somebody that can say things about things that are directly relevant for your application to the department. So if you've been working, as I say, in NGOs, in think tanks, in other, perhaps kind of policy-related institutions. Again, it may not be so much of a problem because perhaps a lot of the things you've been doing as part of those roles, as part of those jobs, the linkages may be fairly clear already between that role and what you would do at CEU, what you want to study. If, as many of us do and have done, because we need to make our way through the educational system, we have summer jobs, we work in restaurants, things like that, probably best to avoid a letter of reference from the restaurant manager. It's very unlikely that that person can draw out of what you've been doing in the local Vendiglo something that can tell us about your capabilities and skills as related to academia. So, best to kind of put those references to one side. So, just to recap kind of very generally about the three things and about the relationship. The statement of purpose, the letter of intent. What are you doing? What have you been doing? That directly informs what you want to do with us here. An academic piece of writing that tells us how you go about things academically, how you think on paper, and the relationship between what you're writing about and what you've said you're interested in your letter of intent. And then letters of recommendation from people who can genuinely tell us something more about the kind of skills, about the things that you've been doing, that's already been reflected in the letter of intent and the academic piece of writing. So, three very important things, and three things that should have those clear connections between them, ideally. Best to leave it at that for the moment and think about any specific things that we need to ask.
Extension of the letters of recommendation, we should tell them with some extension, more or less, it's one page,
It's a difficult one. It's always the kind of thing, how long is a piece of string? I mean, enough space so that we can learn something interesting about you and what you've been doing. I mean, on the one hand, I don't think we need 4 pages to learn that, but on the other hand, maybe we need more than a paragraph.
And half a page, is it enough?
Well, I mean, it could be. I mean, if the person who's writing the letter of recommendation is very good at expressing concisely a number of important things about you, perhaps. I don't know. I'm very reluctant to kind of to say things which imply something kind of very hard and fast, if you like, some kind of absolutes. But I don't know, a page to 2 pages, I mean, I think is more than enough for somebody to say these kind of things about you.
I have a fairly specific question, and a little sensitive only affects me, but so let's say that your undergraduate degree didn't entirely concentrate on what you're interested in applying for a master's program here. And for example, you had a very flexible schedule and you could take all sorts of different classes. And you ask somebody to write a letter of recommendation who isn't actually in a field that you were probably in here.
Mm-hmm. You're certainly not the only one. There are some departments in the university, more so than others, that accept students from quite a diverse number of academic backgrounds. international relations would be one of those departments. What you then need to do, well, there's two things. I mean, one about is the reference, and I think one is about the letter of intent. In the letter of intent, if you are justifying kind of moving discipline, you know, you've been in a sociology department or a history department and you want to move to IR, you would talk about how is it through the history degree that you've become exposed to some things which are now leading you away from history and towards international relations. And I guess for the letter of intent you would concentrate quite heavily on how that particular move in your own progression is developing. For the letter of recommendation, I think, of course, it would be disingenuous if I said that it didn't have any bearing, any effect on it to have a person writing a reference from outside the field. Yeah, for international relations, if it comes from a professor who's been teaching you international relations, it means that that person can say some very specific things that have resonance with us because we're in the same discipline. However, because broadly speaking what we're interested in is how you function intellectually, regardless of the field, that person can still tell us some very, very important things about you. I mean, particularly if, broadly speaking, we kind of reside in the social sciences. How we go about many, many things in the social sciences are common amongst the disciplines. So we would recognise a lot of the things that somebody's telling about you, even if it wasn't international relations.
Can I comment on this? I'm enrolled in relational studies, which is like a very unique department. There are 3 departments like this everywhere. So it was for me kind of unfeasible to try and convince somebody who's in the field of my previous university. And I think this is not an advantage. I mean, I was, for example, writing my thesis on nationalism, so I related this. I asked my supervisor, you know, and so it appeared in the recommendation letter, in my research proposal. That's how you can find a connection.
I actually think it's exactly right. It's very important. And I think that also one thing that you can do is that the person that you're approaching for the reference, it's a history professor, like that. You can make it clear. I'm now applying to an international relations department. And maybe within that letter of reference, the person can write it in a way that he or she is making some kind of comment about your ability to move from one field to another. That yes, this person already has these skills that would equip him or her extremely well to make the move from history or sociology to international relations. And again, that's a very good way of, I say, reinforcing the linkage between the reference letter and the letter of intent to begin with.
My question is, my professor who supervises my thesis writing is a professor at CEU, but the department I'm applying for is not a department he's working. So is it a problem if I ask him to write my letter of recommendation when he's inside CEU?
Oh, no. I mean, one would say that could be a little bit of a benefit. I mean, I'm not trying to say a benefit in this any kind of thing untoward going on in terms of application procedures. No, it means that because that person obviously knows the institution, that person knows the kind of challenges that you would be facing, and is able to again, say some very, very specific things to us, the departments, about how you would face those challenges. Yeah, we would take extremely seriously a letter of recommendation from somebody that we know knows fully about us. And that would be an extremely good thing to do in the circumstances.
And also professors at CEU know how to write that.
Yeah.
Paul, we have lots of questions from students who ask how important it is, say, on MA level, I assume on PhD level it's extremely important, that research interest of prospective students fits into the department of interest. For example, it's something like, let me give you an actual example from international relations. I'm interested in civil war in Africa during this period, and so on and so forth. I look at the department website and I don't see any courses related to that. Does it make my chances slimmer or not?
There could be a kind of a yes and a no to that. On one hand, to restate, I think that we need to see, if possible, a very, very clear connection between the kind of what I'm interested in and when you look at the website of the departments to see what the courses are, the backgrounds of the professors, that you need to see that the department can deliver, if you like, on what it is that you want to do. Otherwise, the question would be, why are you coming to us? You're clearly setting up an interest that we know that you know that we can't satisfy. So, on the one hand, it would be if there is a quite distinct mismatch between intentions and target department, that doesn't necessarily help you. However, I think it's still possible, primarily through the letter of intent, to justify how you can explore what you are interested in through a particular way or ways within what we do in the department. Exactly, I mean, to use the example again, if you're interested in ethnic conflict, civil war in sub-Saharan Africa, we don't have area specialists on sub-Saharan Africa, we can't help you there. But we do have people in the department who teach and research in security and who do look from a more conceptual, theoretical perspective at the questions of ethnic conflicts, civil wars, post-conflict reconstruction. So you can look for the things that, even if it doesn't press the button so explicitly, you can nevertheless say, well, however, you do this which could be important and relevant, and you do that which somehow also kind of feeds in to what I want to do. I think the other related thing to that is that some departments might have a greater expectation that you have a relatively clear research agenda for yourself when you come into the department, so that you are already at a stage where not only can you say, this is the department for me because they do this, but also, in terms of particularly theses, this is what I will be working towards primarily throughout the year, and I want to write a thesis in this. For some departments that can be important. To speak personally, for international relations, it's not that important because we assume that your research interests, what you will eventually write the thesis in, are not so much informed about what you've been doing, but are informed about what we do. You'll be stimulated to write and research in this because we as a department want to present you with these things, and you will be excited about what we do. So, in that way, some things, yes, maybe you need to signal before you come. Some things we assume that will come when you're actually with us already.